Hello, this is Ms. Schrader. Today we're going to be talking about comparing and contrasting Romanesque and Gothic architecture, and you can see examples of that here. My students, you need a piece of paper with which to take notes. When you're done, I'd actually like you to give me between 5 and 10 sentences, so it's okay if you give me a little bit more. Remember, you want to start off with a strong introductory statement. There are many differences and similarities between Gothic and Romanesque art. Your decision on that, but remember you are doing a compare and contrast. All right, so here's a fact sheet for you. Romanesque and Gothic architecture are used in large, important buildings during the medieval period, churches, cathedrals, castles, and government buildings. Romanesque architecture is based on the idea of Roman, that they are Roman in style, and they're actually considered to be a fusion of Roman, Carolingian, and Carolingian refers to German and French empires, and Ottonian, which refers to the Byzantines. So a mix of those. Begins around the 6th century CE, remember that's current era, and runs through the 12th century CE. It's known for thick walls, barrel vaults, and large pillars to support the roof. They have small windows. The doors and the windows are done in semicircular arches. Now, contrary to the things that people are saying, you don't have either or with Romanesque and Gothic. Quite frankly, a lot of churches will be blended and have a little bit of both. Gothic was named because some people didn't think it was very nice and they thought it was made by the Goths, which were a primitive people. It's actually a development from the Romanesque starting around 1100 in France and England. It includes a word that you guys are going to think is hysterical, flying buttresses, to hold up the walls. Thus, the walls can be thinner than Romanesque walls and can hold large, beautiful stained glass windows. They have ornate towers, these long spiraling towers, pointed arch doorways, and vaulted ceilings. Okay, so here you have an example of Romanesque architecture. This is the cathedral at Angoulême in France. I can see that the walls are very thick. The windows are actually on the small side. In fact, some of these things appear like they're doors or windows, but they're actually just decorative. And here you can see the circular arch over the doorway. This is the way they would normally do the doors and the windows. This is going to make sure that the ceiling over the doorway is stronger, going to make it easier to keep it up so it doesn't fall in. And here you can see an example of the very small windows that a Romanesque building is going to have. A window basically will weaken the structure because it's a hole in the wall, and the walls keep the building up. Because the walls have to be so thick, the windows have to be small so that the building stays up. And so the interiors of the buildings would be very dark. This is the interior of a Romanesque church. You can see that it does have a very high ceiling. They did want to make sure they had the nice high ceilings, but you can also see that it has that arch, that circular part to it. This is going to help to keep the ceiling up. This is a bird's eye view of what a Romanesque church would have looked like. That refers to if a bird were flying over it or if God were looking down upon it. This is what it would look like. And hopefully you're seeing that it looks like a cross. They intentionally did this. They want to make sure that it looks like something that perhaps if God needed to be finding them, he could find them based on the cross. Keep in mind that people of the Middle Ages, a lot of them could not read and write. And the purpose behind a church was to make you feel closer to God. The priests, the bishops, etc., they are telling you what the Bible says, but they want you to look at the church and think, yes, this is a place that is going to take me closer to God. And that's one of the reasons why they are making it in the shape of a cross, even though the people can't actually see that. They're thinking, okay, God can see us better if we are in the church. I was trying to find a famous example of Romanesque architecture, and this is the most famous piece I could find. This is the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and yes, as you can see, it is leaning. It wasn't meant as a church. I believe it is a tower for protection for watching the area. But when it was originally built, yeah, because it was so heavy and because the ground in some areas is not very stable, it started to lean, and that's why it is famous. But I don't want you to look at it as a leaning tower. I want you to look at it as a piece of Romanesque architecture. You can see the arches that are holding up the doorways all the way through. You can see that it has very small windows, and the walls, while you cannot see them, are very thick. Okay, so let's talk about some Gothic buildings. This is Chartres Cathedral in Chartres. I hope I'm saying it correctly. And as you can see, it has two big spired towers. That is really famous in Gothic architecture. You can also see that it has more windows. And see in the very front there, that circular thing, that is a circular glass window. Because of the way the architecture is done, they can make the walls thinner without the building collapsing in on itself. And then they can put in these beautiful stained glass windows, which is really one of the things that Gothic work is famous for. Here we have an example of a Gothic doorway. As you can see, it is not round, it points upward towards heaven. In fact, almost everything about Gothic artwork is trying to point your eye upward towards heaven. This is the Chartres rose stained glass window. Most Gothic churches will have one of these rose glass windows, so the big circular part, and then the part beneath, which will normally have saints in it. As I've mentioned, one of the main things with a Gothic church is that they're going to be able to have thinner walls and put in those beautiful windows. Now, keep in mind, if you are a medieval person and you're going into a church and it is flooded with this beautiful light pouring in through these stained glass windows, you are going to feel like you are closer to God. And this is an example of that really funny word that I gave you a little earlier, flying buttresses. Why they call them that, I am not really certain, particularly the flying part. But the purpose of behind these is they push against the walls while the walls push out against them, which makes sure that the building doesn't fall down. In Romanesque style, the walls are so thick, all the weight of the building is held on the walls. And then they've got those arches across the top. But with a Gothic building, the flying buttresses push against the walls while the walls push back. That prevents the building from falling down. All right, this is Notre Dame in Paris, and you can see the flying buttresses towards the front part. Notre Dame is one of those buildings that has a mix of Romanesque and Gothic. At the back, you can see the blocky parts, the blocky towers that are Romanesque, and towards the front, you have the spire and some of the areas with large windows. If you're not aware of it, about a year or so ago, there was a fire in Notre Dame, and the big spire fell down, and a lot of the interiors were burnt, and they are in the process of figuring out exactly what they want to do to rebuild it. And Gothic churches not only can be larger inside, but they are lighter inside because they have the big windows. And so I chose this picture to show an interior because, one, it does show it very large. I believe this is a part of Notre Dame, but mostly because of so many windows. They just have so many. And if you were looking at a bird's eye view of a Gothic church from above, you would still see that cross shape, but you'll notice with this one, they are showing those huge spires that go upwards towards heaven. And here, once again, we have a picture of Notre Dame in Paris. And I wanted to mention the fact that, yes, a lot of cathedrals and churches and things have a mixture of both Gothic and Romanesque. Frequently, they would have built originally in the Romanesque style. They would decide later to add to it and make that Gothic, or maybe parts of it had burnt down and they're going to change it. So frequently you will find a mixture as you do in Notre Dame. Okay, my students, remember you are writing between 5 and 10 sentences for me, telling me the similarities and the differences. And for everybody else, I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you.